Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto Manga Chapter review. This one is going to be for Chapter 75, and this of course is a volume ending chapter, so it'll be the fourth one in a volume when it comes out in that way. And so this was always going to be an important chapter for Boruto, because I think the community had reached sort of, I would say, basically breaking point on you have to say something now, otherwise this manga is absolutely just spinning its wheels and it doesn't seem to know what direction it's going or anything like that. I think everyone had gotten to the point where the whole Amado, he clearly has all this information to tell us, but he's not telling us yet, had just lasted way too long. So this was a chapter where the setup was here. The last chapter ended with Amado is about to speak and reveal everything. And so how did they do here in this chapter? They did it. They absolutely did it. And in my mind, they delivered. This was an interesting chapter, start to finish, delivering lots of very interesting, intriguing information, lots to sift through, very text, dialogue dense chapter, but in a good way. And that oftentimes, like I'd say like the last bunch of chapters especially, you read through it once and then there are maybe 2 pages in the entire chapter that you need to kind of reread, look back on, that actually important stuff happens. But here it does feel like well over, 75% of this chapter is actually like notable, interesting information, and it seems to set the stage for, okay, there's still a few more mysteries. Like, I was really surprised at actually how much got revealed in this. Usually this is a series that when it goes about revealing things, it really does take its time. It'll stretch it on for chapters upon chapters. So them just getting straight through tons of information. Now, like, there's still more to come, obviously, but they did good stuff here. And I think that's the sense here of, like, I was worried that this would be a chapter that would only do like the bare minimum to get the series back on track, but I think they managed to deliver it here. Now, does this make up for especially like the last year's worth of chapters? I'm not quite sure. I think there are ways where they definitely could have had most of this information happen, I'd say even like 4 or 5 chapters ago, if not more than that. So in that sense, there's a sense where, like, calm down a little bit, but you can't deny that this is not a hype chapter. This is a important Boruto chapter that I think people will remember going forward. Like, go back to chapter 75 for all the lore that we got, and that's what we get here. So let's go through this one. There's a lot to cover here. So yes, there will be a lot of me just reading through the dialogue here because I do think a lot of it is important. But anyway, so the cover page, we get Daemon here. Not too much to say about this one. Interesting colors once again. But let's go straight in. And boom, straight away. They quickly do the stuff of like, okay, now everyone is aware of what Ada and Daemon's powers are. We're not spending a whole chapter catching up on this. It's just basically 2 pages to be like, okay, basically the entire main cast is listening to this. Now everyone knows, no need for any questions or to bring this up again. So Ada enchants all regardless of her gender. Only blood relatives and Otsutsuki aren't affected, meaning it doesn't work on Boruto and Kawaki and Daemon. Her left eye, Senrigan, allows her to peek in on things happening across the world. She can also hear conversations if she were actually there. It lets her browse past events, but she can't see anything prior to her birth. So for now, she can only go back 16 years, highlighting that Ada is 16 years old. Okay, Daemon, he reflects all attacks. Any action that would inflict harm on him, and though it's necessary for his hand to be touching another person, his ability will also transfer to the person currently touching him. So that final bit, I don't think we actually knew that he can, like, literally, I suppose, this is how he protects Ada, touches her, and the same applies to her. Which I suppose makes sense to a certain degree. And Naruto's like, whoa, that's a crazy list of abilities there. But interestingly, they bring up something much later on in this chapter that in this description actually sort of gets highlighted here of, like, Ada has 2 crazy, like, very different abilities, whereas fundamentally Daemon only has 1. and we'll address like why that's sort of significant a little bit later on. So, Amado goes on to further explain that like even murderous like intent also applies. So the ability is not just about like direct attacks, and it can also apply to that. So Kawaki looks at Daemon and is just like, I'm going to take you out, and boom, Kawaki gets like slapped across the face by no one. So that's his ability activating. So that's all that. Now, Naruto asks the important question that I think everyone's been asking. How have you developed these abilities? Like, you, scientist guy, how have you developed like abilities that are like best in class, basically shinobi like abilities? How on earth has this happened? And Amado just is like, develop wouldn't be accurate. I'm a mere human, not a god. The crafting of abilities is a feat permitted only to gods. What I did is simply transplant things that already existed. And so, okay, explain transplanting here. Their abilities were brought about by a god, someone who actually evolved into a godlike being. Otsutsuki Shibai. So, brand new name of this legendary Otsutsuki who apparently fulfilled the overall sort of like, I guess, clan objective, which is eating enough chakra fruits, becoming powerful enough that you basically become a god. Shibai is one who actually accomplished that, and we'll get more on him as we go on. So big reveal here of this character. So who is this guy? Amado immediately says, he's no longer with us. All that exists are his remains. And he's like, do you remember what I told you about how the chakra fruit forms from absorbing all life on a planet? And it's a mass of colossal energy and genetic information. And this is how the Otsutsuki is a species that evolves through constantly eating these. And he says, repeated undergoing of karmic resurrection. He cheated death, devoured many fruit over several millennia, and eventually led to godhood. And we get this look at least a silhouette of clearly an Otsutsuki who is meant to represent them as a god. And again, we've got a representation of this before when we were previously told about, you know, multiple chakra fruits, the aim of the Otsutsuki, and we got another look at a godlike being. So it confirms that that is actually a possibility of a thing to actually happen. And again, we're talking about several millennia ago, several thousand years ago. So we're going way back here. Whereas I think the timeline of Naruto, for the most part, is actually relatively small, even factoring in, like, say, Kaguya's backstory and stuff like that. So it is interesting, the timescales that are being highlighted here. So, getting back to the original topic, you're saying these various cheat-like powers of Ada and Daemon were originally abilities that the Shibai possessed. Yes. And Amado says that transplanting DNA harvested from Shibai's remains results in endowing of one or more of his abilities. An interesting point here. Shikamaru asks Katasuke, who's listening in, and is like, do you know about this? Like, is this realistic as a thing to happen? And he basically just points out that with our normal level of tech, no. But it seems like Amado, who already was a scientist on the breaking edge of things, plus having like Otsutsuki technology as well, I guess it is technically possible. So he's kind of like, it's a little beyond me, but everything I've seen about the higher tech that they have suggests it is possible. And he points out that, yeah, the airship crash site, the stuff that's in Kawaki's body, it's definitely possible. There's a little bit of back and forth about, you know, Shikamaru is being skeptical, rightfully so, about this, because finally, is Amado telling the truth? How much of it can you believe? And there's a bit of back and forth about that. But anyway, next reveal. Shibai's various abilities were quite incredible. It is said that without needing to weave signs with a ninjutsu, he generated storms with a wave of his hand and called forth thunderbolts with just an angry roar. Given the name Shinjutsu, such godlike abilities were neither ninjutsu nor sage arts. They were phenomena equivalent to divine miracles. And he points out at this point as well, in addition to Ada and Daemon's abilities, Code's claw marks are also Shinjutsu. And this is actually a notable reveal as well, in terms of like, yeah, his ability to just have instantaneous like transportation like that, like a teleportation jutsu is already one of the high level ones from like the Rinnegan and stuff like that, anything that resembles like space-time. So Code just having what seems like a normal ability to do it at will and no real limitation on it is crazy. So that's pretty cool. As are the Sakuna Hakona and Daikoku Ten that Kawaki inherited from Ishiki. So it's sort of being pointed out here that obviously like all the Otsutsukis have abilities that are in essence like these Shinjutsu godlike abilities, and that this is a big lore reveal here, massive actually. In fact, Ninjutsu itself fundamentally attempts to reproduce phenomena similar to Shinjutsu through weaving signs and concentrating one's chakra. So Sarada speaks up and is just like, oh, so you're saying our stuff is just a pale imitation? And I guess that makes sense, that even the most powerful, for instance, he mentioned the thunderbolts with a roar, even those powerful lightning style jutsu is, I suppose, effectively just this very complicated way of doing an ability that fundamentally this Otsutsuki god just naturally could do at will. And this all makes sense because of like the whole reason humans have chakra in Naruto is ultimately because of Otsutsuki stuff in the past. So this to me all makes sense. It fits really nicely. It's an expansion of the lore without breaking it apart. And I quite like it. There might be really technical stuff that you can get into that maybe seems contradictory, but at least to me, this seems like, no, actually, I actually quite like a lot of this. This is pretty good. So anyway, from there. So yeah, the Shikamaru points out the Otsutsuki technological capabilities far exceed our own. So we've never really got that before of just like Otsutsuki technology and what exactly that means. Because otherwise they don't seem to use technology, because for the most part they have abilities that, you know, in a way go past the need for technology. But it highlights, I suppose, like the thing that contains the 10 tails and that whole dimension. Like theoretically they might have abilities that can create like those areas and so on. So it's very interesting. So the obvious question comes up, well, with the karma mark in place, they reveal that as well. Karma is one of these abilities. Why is the god a corpse? Why isn't he around anymore? What happened to him? Did someone kill him somehow? And Amado points out, I don't really know what happened. It's a possibility, I guess, that he was killed, but his theory is actually that after evolving so much and ascending to a god, basically, he feels that he actually ascended so high that he probably ascended into a higher dimension where a physical body isn't even needed. So it's not that he died. He went beyond the need of a body, and so he discarded his body. He left behind his body because he didn't need it anymore. That's why the corpse of the Otsutsuki god basically is just around, I guess, to be used. Now, what they don't address in all of this is, wait, how did Amado get access to this? Because surely the corpse of the Otsutsuki god would be something closely guarded by like the leaders of the Otsutsuki clan, aware that it contains so much power. Then, and this gets into like, oh, there's a whole backstory, it seems like, here with Ishiki, where I guess if Ishiki was the highest ranking of all the Otsutsuki related to Earth, that must mean that he maybe was high enough to maybe have access to it and get some of this to give to Amado, to extract abilities, to give to other people and so on. There is a little bit, there's definitely some gap filling that is needed in addition to this chapter, as we'll get to here. Some of it begins to get filled in, but it's very clear that there is more to come. But anyway, so that's that. Discarded the body, that explains a lot. So this is where we get to the idea of like, okay, back on track specific to Amado. Otsutsuki powers contain hope to make what is impossible to us, humans, possible, such as bringing my daughter back to life. So here's the big thing. One of the big things with Amado as a character, everyone's been wondering about. What is the whole deal with his daughter? We know that this was ultimately the wish, that if Ishiki succeeded, he was going to grant all the Kara members some sort of a wish. And Amado's wish was clearly bringing the daughter back to life. So how did that change him, and why did he oppose him, and what's going on here? What's the story of this? So we get that here. But interestingly, we cut away to Sarda, who's obviously listening into this, as Delta arrives, relating to the what's happening here, of course. So this gets actually revealed here. The daughter is basically Delta, but they explain it in an interesting way. So she just wants to see Ada because she's still like entranced by her, basically. And so this is when Sumire arrives, activates Delta's shutdown command, and we just get the idea of like, okay, that's how strong Ada's charm is, that it still works on Delta from just that one meeting a while back. And yeah, we cut back into the kind of room, of course, with everyone. And okay, you mentioned your daughter before. Your daughter died 12 years ago. Boruto does note that's around when I was born. So that's interesting. And this is where he mentions my daughter Akebi, A-K-E-B-I, Akebi, not sure about the pronunciation, suffered from a terrible disease. Unknown cause, no drug or cure was effective. It was a fatal illness that doctors had given up on. I didn't rail against them because I'd already discovered a way to resolve the situation. I'd make her a new body via cloning. So, okay, this establishes Amado was already a scientist, and he was on the cutting edge of things, and he leaned in the direction of cloning. He didn't care about ethics anymore. I'd give her a new shell that wasn't defective, and he felt that I know more about this. This is probably an easier path than creating some like crazy medicine that cures everything. And he mentions Akebi died a short time later, but I wasn't sad because I'd preserved Akebi's brain and succeeded in extracting, digitizing, and creating a backup of her memories. About 9 months after my daughter's death, she was abruptly completed. She had Akebi's voice, her exact appearance, plus her memories, but she was a total stranger. As we see, the reveal here is that, yes, this is Delta, and this explains everything. So everyone had basically predicted that this was the case, but they just refrained from ever really having Amado directly make any statement about it until now. But it was the most likely candidate ultimately. So yeah, we see Delta here, and the idea is that he seemed to do everything correctly. He made an exact clone of her body that didn't have the illness. He digitized her memories, but he notes here that he does this multiple times. But each time she was someone other than Akebi. It was just not possible to reproduce the one who existed before. And this is where he makes his big realization here, and the shift happens. I realized that this was the domain of gods, a world that humans were not meant to step into. So he kind of realizes that with his level of technology, just using pure human technology, this is as far as he can get. He can make someone who looks exactly like his daughter, and I suppose maybe has aspects of his daughter, but is fundamentally, it is not what he wanted. But it is possible, it seems like, to actually make that happen. And this is when literally enter Ishiki. So right as he's at his lowest moment, where he begins to realize my daughter no longer exists, we see Ishiki appear behind him. And he said he'd reunite me with her if I assisted him. And yeah, when his objectives were completed, he'd reward me by reviving my daughter. I aligned with Kara as a last hope, not knowing that his goal, the chakra fruit, would come at the cost of this planet's life. So this helps to explain Amado's shift to working against Ishiki, in that he realizes that I would do anything to get my daughter back, but if the planet that we live on has to die to make that happen, that is a step too far. Because where is he going to live? And he kind of gets that it's not a good deal. But he hasn't given up on his daughter. Jigen never specified how he was planning to revive my daughter. It's even possible he may not have ever intended to do so. But as I worked towards talking him down, I discerned the mechanism of karmic resurrection. So we know about how the karma mark works. But here we go. It's what Ishiki was trying to do through vessels. And my attempt to reproduce Akebi using a clone was almost identical. My failed efforts at reproducing personality, which crossed into the domain of gods, was possible only with the miracle of godly power, the Shinjutsu karma. So this all makes sense. Like this writing is actually, I think, very good, and it makes a lot of sense that technology has a limit to how far it can go, but fundamentally karma, that ability for Otsutsukis to revive, is a ability that ultimately stems back to that god Otsutsuki and is a godlike ability, and it will make what he wanted to do happen, because his plan is that I added Akebi's data to Kawaki's reconstructed karma. So we didn't know about that before. So that's what he's done. So that digitized memory data of his daughter is now in Kawaki's karma mark in his arm. All Kawaki has to do is implant karma into a new cloned body that I'll prepare. That should be enough to revive Akebi. And so everyone's like, oh, in a way, like, oh, is that it? I totally thought you had something crazy planned that was a lot worse. In a way, if you just told us about this and informed everyone of what was happening, I'm sure we would have helped you do this if this was the main thing that you wanted. So this is the one bit where you begin to be like, there's definitely a twist to this, a counterpoint. There's no way it's that simple where Kawaki can just be like, karma mark on a cloned body and just his daughter is back without anything happening to Kawaki. And this is where it kind of feels like, is this going to result in basically Kawaki having to basically sacrifice himself? That he is still, I suppose, to Amado the vessel. This is the only reason why Amado seemed to show some sense of care for Kawaki, because it was his way basically to get his daughter back, and that in whatever way that this is going to work, there's the cloned body, the memory data, but the power needed to maybe do this and fully activate it might require like Kawaki's life or something like that. I'm guessing we're going to lean in that direction, because I think we are building towards something that is going to make Kawaki freak out in some way and make him go against what's happening here. So then we get to this point where Shikamaru is like, Ada, can I trust Amado's tale? Can you check with your Senrigan if he even had a daughter in the first place, and in terms of like how much of his story can you verify? And Amado's like, how dare you? But again, everyone is like, Amado, are you sure you should be doing this? But he's like, nope, this is my job to make sure the truth comes out. And Ada's like, oh, you've quite the awful personality, Shikadir, but I kind of like it. So as he's like, go ahead with it, Ada, very interesting. I wasn't expecting this at all in this chapter. Boruto, just sitting there, is suddenly contacted by Momoshiki, sort of speaking in his head. And it's like, boy, react if you can hear me. And he's like, I was wondering why your petty thoughts were suddenly available to me, but this confirms it. A new effect that has arisen from having supplemented some of your body with your body's damaged flesh with my data, it seems our thoughts are crossing over. So we're even more leaning into the idea of the kind of two are becoming one, and the whole Borushiki thing might actually really literally be what's maybe happening here. We'll see the full scope. It does still seem like Boruto is in control, but that Momoshiki is much more a factor in this than we maybe thought before. So he's like, don't let Kawaki catch on. I'd rather not tangle with him again. But about what Amado just said, there's something off about it. And Boruto's like, oh, you distrust him? Which part? The whole part about the gods, Shibai? I thought that sounded pretty shady. But no, Momoshiki is like, no. Shibai part is true. He was an Otsutsuki who, as Amado correctly guessed, is no longer in this dimension. So they seem to confirm what Amado's theory was, that he like transcended beyond the need of a physical body. So that's what happened. The same with Shinjutsu. I too have observed this plane a long time and have an intimate understanding of all existent, I guess, Shinjutsu. So then you're saying he's lying about his daughter. But Momoshiki says, who knows? I have no knowledge of that. It's Ada's ability that is bothering me. Amado asserted that Ada's abilities are Shinjutsu, and her Senrigan certainly is. However, the love charm power cannot be. I know all the Shinjutsu, but I've never heard of such an ability. In short, it's possible that Amado is lying. So Boruto obviously is like, wait, does that mean it's a scientific ninja tool or something else? And also, why would he very specifically lie about that ability in particular? Like, why the need? And so Momoshiki is like, exactly. That's what raises the question. Then we cut back to Ada and she's like, it was only a quick peek, but Amado's daughter, Sanzu Akebi, did exist. She died when she was 24. So that seems to match up with the age that Delta looks to be. At the very least, those events he told us about were all true. Happy now. Yes. And again, we get a little bit of back and forth about, Shikamaru, I'm just doing my job. The reason for my distrust lies with you. Don't pretend you're innocent while criticizing others, because of course, Amado has kept this from everyone for like a pretty long amount of time. He's been there in the Leaf Village, and only now is he actually telling them about this stuff. So, again, just another mention from Momoshiki about their thoughts leaking into each other against their wills. You better not be trying to trick me. But he just says, babble away, I for one hope it will be brief. And then Boruto goes to respond to that when all of a sudden, boom, eye power activates. It's been so long since the Jogan has ever been referenced. I don't even know if that's the case, but is it the Jogan? Is it like just the Byakugan? I'm not really sure, but based on the fact that what Boruto seems to see here, he basically gets a vision of the future here. It probably has to be Jogan ultimately, but we'll see. And so we get some interesting cuts here too. Obviously, a big sound happening. The Hokage stone faces. We see two shinobi talking to each other. Did you find him? He couldn't have gotten that far yet. Don't let him escape. We see, Shikacho be like, you, that just ain't what a friend does, you hear? And then on the next page, we see Sarada talking to like Mitsuki, found him over here. And then Mitsuki in sage mode, really angry, saying, you have managed to truly anger me. And then we see Kawaki with his arm in the kind of ninja tech arm that he can do, the horn kind of active, karma mark seemingly fully active. The eye power fades away, and Boruto's like, what was that? Panel of Momoshiki just looking down, and then Ada glances over at Boruto, ... of like, what just happened here? And is this some sort of a thing where, did this activate because Ada used her own power, which relates to sort of time, but looking backwards? So it's sort of connected with Boruto and activated like the power of his Jogan or whatever to look a little bit into the future. Because this is getting towards, I guess, time skip style stuff. And the question here is obviously like, the images that we see, are they what Boruto is like looking at, or is this just like manga panels basically that it doesn't really matter the perspective or anything like that? Or are we meant to believe here that this is Boruto like looking on the ground or something like that, looking at Inoshikacho, looking over at Sarada, and it's maybe Mitsuki talking to Boruto, which would be crazy to get to a situation where that happens. But I do think it probably is leaning in the direction of Kawaki has angered everyone, and Kawaki is leaving, doing something. So I don't know, is this the situation where whatever happens with Kawaki, this is where he like takes Naruto and goes to hide him somewhere or something like that. There's obviously highlights that there's quite a bit that's going to happen. And we know from a lot of references in recent chapters, not this one, that the event that will take everything from Boruto, those eyes will take everything from you, is going to happen soon. And we're really heavily building towards that. The other thing in all of this is that, interestingly, they didn't have code interrupt this at all. And outside of referencing Code's abilities, we didn't get anything with him or really what's going on that side of things. And this little flash forward that we're getting here doesn't seem to reference Code either. So that's the question here, is like, what exactly is going on with all of this? Because a lot of my speculation about Amado is that I maybe felt that what if he wanted the chakra fruit to maybe act as a way to like do something with? But obviously I suppose we'll have to get into that eventually, because Code wants to do something with the chakra fruit that will make him an Otsutsuki. A new Otsutsuki being in play would be somewhat interesting. But it's a fascinating chapter for sure. Like, just skimming through it again, like, obviously the main thing here is the reveal of Shibai Otsutsuki as this someone who actually achieved the goal of the Otsutsuki. He seems to still like technically exist, but potentially in a different dimension as a like literal, actual godlike being, and not necessarily just like a very, very powerful person type thing, to the point where like his body has been used to give all these crazy powers to other people. And like I said before, that's something that probably needs to get explained. Is, okay, we know about Kara, we know that Amado used before, we were literally just told it was like scientific ninja tech, ninja tool tech, to make all the Kara members powerful. But now we get that it's also that plus implants from the DNA from the corpse of Shibai. So when did that happen? Like, how did Ishiki or Amado get some of Shibai's DNA or something like that? And then I suppose there's probably going to have to be a sense for like how much of the whole Otsutsuki thing is like he's one of maybe like the original Otsutsukis or something like that, so all the powers stem from him and that's where the others get it from. Or is it just a case that every Otsutsuki who eats a chakra fruit gets an ability? So does that mean that every chakra fruit within it effectively has like one godlike ability or something like that? There's a few little connective pieces that I'm very interested to know about with all of this. But big lore referencing like the full history of the universe, pretty much as far as we're aware, connecting to Amado's personal story about bringing his daughter back and seemingly answering most of those questions, giving a good reason behind why Delta is viewed as being like a failure to bring his daughter back, but a way why that can happen, while also bringing in the rather complicated and what felt like a very disappointing plot point from most of the chapters post Ishiki's death, which was the whole, ooh, does Kawaki need to get his karma mark back? And now here's another clear-cut reason for that seems to be the core of what maybe we don't quite believe him really comes down to. So all we've really been told is that as far as Momoshiki is aware, and he seems to suggest he's an expert on this, Ada's attraction ability, the kind of love-based power, is not Otsutsuki in nature. Meaning that it had to have been manufactured, I guess, by Amado. But why? So is this some sort of a thing where like he developed this ability somehow by like maybe manipulating godlike powers, and maybe this is some crazy new thing he's actually invented himself, that is something he fundamentally maybe wants his daughter to have because it's an ability that protects a person basically from all other people? Is that the whole kind of point here? Because obviously Ada is annoyed with Amado because she has this ability. So why does it even exist? And why is that being presented as being the most like important thing that he basically lied about? So it seems like there's that, and maybe some aspect of the story with his daughter that isn't quite adding up. Because of course Momoshiki can't confirm or deny necessarily anything Amado specifically said about his daughter. So what exactly is going on here is probably the real question here. So yeah, the other thing in this is going back to this, he says, bring my daughter back to life. Daughter died 12 years ago. He says she suffered from a disease and died when she was 24. So did she have it her like entire life? Or what? That's probably one of the aspects of this, is like, was this something that just suddenly developed at 24 here? Or is it something she's had for a longer time, and what does it mean? Where did it come from? Because obviously, like, if he's developed cloning, is there maybe some sort of a weird thing where he inadvertently, like, doing some sort of genetic, testing or something like that, gave her the illness that he's now trying to cure? There's definitely a few little twists that they can add into this, but I'm pretty pleased with what we got. There's a lot going on here, and by the looks of things, it does seem like we're going to get, like, say, the next chapter is probably going to have to continue this. More questions, more filling in of the gaps. I don't know what we're immediately going to jump into after this, because we're probably, what we're waiting for here is, obviously, Code is going to have to do something at some point. The details about, say, like, oh, I have a clone ready to go, Kawaki, are you going to do this now? I assume Kawaki is probably going to have some questions about how exactly does this work, in terms of, like, is something going to happen to me if I do this, and what exactly are the details there? So very interested by that, and I just think they've got Boruto now into a pretty strong position. I like basically everything they brought up in this chapter. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this Boruto chapter 75. It was a lot of build up to it, but at least for me, I think it delivered, and I think the series is now in a pretty good spot to just go off these reveals, expand on them, and it feels like we actually have a direction into the future of, like, well, there's your reference in terms of bigger Otsutsuki threats out there. Are we necessarily going to deal with Shibai as being the end boss? I'm not necessarily sure, but we're probably going to want to prevent another character becoming an Otsutsuki god, but we'll have to wait and see. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below, but otherwise, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.